Hello, everybody, and welcome to my brown bag, BigCommerce and Why Size Matters. My name is Filip, and for those who don't know me, I work as a full-stack developer here in Salsita. Okay. Before we dive into the BigCommerce, let me say a few words about why should you care about it and e-commerce in general. I surely don't need to go into any details since I remember it was already mentioned a lot, but simply saying, e-commerce is a huge and interesting market and makes it, uh, sorry. Okay. And with our existing references and skill set, it makes it a great opportunity for us. With BigCommerce, we aim to create generally usable templates, integration apps, and workflows that will help us bootstrap client applications in a matter of days and weeks instead of months, regardless on whether it's a simple headless store with custom UI or complex store with incorporated configurator, for example. On the last minute, I also got my hands on this listing, thanks Matt, which basically says the same but in a nice graphical way with some additional information included. So I'll keep it there a few more seconds for you. And okay, so today we'll be talking about what's BigCommerce in general and what's so big about it. Then we'll highlight some specific useful parts of BigCommerce, and we'll wrap it up with a few words about the certification course I've been through a few weeks back. As some of you probably already know, BigCommerce is an e-commerce platform working on a SaaS model based on its motto, Ignite Growth, not Complexity. It lets the customers set the growth ablaze, and it has several, or in the marketing language, limitless possibilities for them to build, innovate, and grow. I believe most of you might have heard of Shopify, which is essentially the same kind of platform, but with slightly different UI, customization tools, and pricing options. On this slide, I copy-pasted 3 marketing highlights regarding building of BigCommerce eShops, which are designed with freedom, operate without worry, and outperform the competition. Just as most of the other platforms, they provide customers the freedom of creating any shop UI they wish by using one of already existing templates and adding any customizations on top of that. The company has certified security, so they grant maximal safety to the customer data. And as for the last point, sure, if the competition is running on Wix or WordPress with WooCommerce, then yes, BigCommerce Shop will most probably outperform them. But from what I found, Speedwise, Shopify, or Volusion are in league of their own. Since I'm not a marketing specialist, I have no idea whether stay agile actually means anything or just sounds nice to the customers. But they sure have reasonably well-built and documented APIs and nice plugin options, which make it really easy to turn headless or integrate any third-party application, like, let's say, some arbitrary 3D configurator application. Finally, they also provide omnichannel commerce, which basically means having seamless customer experience on all shopping channels, be it website, phone, social media, or physical store. Last but not least, BigCommerce comes with some built-in analytics and insights. So that all is nice, but it all sounds like pretty average-sized e-commerce platform, right? Actually, you might be asking now, Philip, what's so big about it then? Well, the answer depends on how do you look at it. It's nothing special compared to the other e-commerce platforms such as Shopify, Wix, or WooCommerce. But at the same time, those mentioned are the biggest e-commerce platforms at the moment with tens of thousands of users. BigCommerce stands aside those thanks to all of its features, which makes it pretty big, I'd say. Now, let's move on to the second part, where we'll be talking about all those features and tools I previously mentioned. Well, not all, but at least those I consider helpful, and a bit of those I recommend to avoid. BigCommerce UI is pretty similar to any other e-commerce platform or content management system. Thanks to this, basically anyone who has ever seen another such tool like WordPress, for example, has no problem controlling it. Aside the different levels of permission one can play with during API token generating, there is also a page builder tool as a part of UI, which allows user with appropriate permissions to modify store's template file variables and content block placements. This makes it possible to change element colors, button styles, or introduce hero banners directly from the UI. Another interesting feature worth mentioning is Theme Files Editor, which is basically an IDE within the UI that allows to change the code directly. Here is a quick look at our sandbox store. I'll try. Here you can see how simply you can generate API tokens, all the permission setting process, and also I show there the two interesting tools I mentioned before, the page builder, which allows you to change the UI of the store. I put this hero banner in here. I modify it a bit. I hide the button, and I change some global variables of the template as well. I change some color and some font size. And then there's also this IDE I mentioned, which allows you to change the code of the template files directly. That's about it. Yeah. BigCommerce provides vast amounts of APIs grouped into two categories. One is storefront APIs, which do not require any authentication tokens or other special headers, since they run in the context of the storefront itself. These are generally focused around the cart, customers, and checkout. The other category is management APIs. Those are the ones you want to use when you do any headless implementation or server-to-server communication. They require an authentication token with appropriate permissions, which can be configured during the token generating in a BigCommerce admin panel I showed before. Finally, every BigCommerce store comes with GraphQL endpoint as well. This one uses bearer token for authentication, but provides much less freedom than the management APIs combined. Another helpful feature BigCommerce provides its users with our apps. They are essentially the same as, for example, WordPress plugins. They get installed through BigCommerce Marketplace, but there is one twist, which is that they need to be hosted by authors themselves. Use case of this is basically any extended feature you can think of, let's say, such as 3D configurator application integration. Now, about feature that I recommend to avoid. BigCommerce has pretty robust theming mechanism, which allows us to customize theme in many different ways. As mentioned, there is a template marketplace that one can pick a template in, and there are also few free templates that can be found on GitHub. Theme files are based on Stencil, which is basically a templating engine quite similar to Symfony Twig or PHP itself. However, in order to maximize freedom given to the user and minimize work they need to do, Stencil themes are broken down into hundreds of tiny template files, forming quite complex template structure, and Stencil language is a bit complicated as well. I believe those things might start being useful once someone gets properly familiar with Stencil themes, but a complete beginner will most probably get quite confused and lost in all of this. Thankfully, Stencil's CLI is based on NPM, which allows anyone to inject any custom NPM packages into the theme and passively override the whole parts of the theme with custom stuff like React components. As mentioned, Stencil template files are basically HTML files with some embedded Stencil code. Most of them look something like this. I'm not sure how readable this is for you, but it's essentially just a bunch of HTML code with embedded Stencil code. And last point, I'd say that the documentation is a first step to success. And when it comes to BigCommerce, I must admit that it has one of the best documentation I've seen. The documentation consists from API docs, which provide detailed information about the most important features of BigCommerce APIs, custom application development, etc. API reference that holds information needed for actual integrations of headless implementation, for example. Theme docs focusing on Stencil and template development, and section dedicated to examples and guides. Here is a quick look at the documentation and the 4 parts I previously mentioned. Here is the API docs, or the section with some pretty detailed information on how to achieve anything you might want. In API reference, you have just the information you need when you're actually develop it. You also have this nice thing that you can test those endpoints here. Theme docs provide some necessary information about Stencil, its functions and its features, and here are those examples and starters. And yeah, well, that's all I have for you for today. Thank you for your attention, and does anyone have any questions?